Do you remember a while back when I mentioned CloverWorks in my first video? I mentioned a show called Rascal Does Not Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai. I'm going to take a line from my I Want to Eat Your Pancreas movie. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Rascal Does Not Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai? That sounds like the strangest name ever. I understand it's a very weird name, but it's a very good TV show. Airing in the fall of 2018 alongside Zombieland Saga, Goblin Slayer, Slime Sakai, Run with the Wind, JoJo Part 5, and a few others, it started under the rug. Who would watch a show with that title, especially with the cover that it had? It looked like another trashy harem ecchi show, but boy was every anime-only watcher so wrong, including myself. It's super interesting. So we got our boy Sakta over here, who's just a normal kid. Or is he? People stay away from him because he has supposedly sent kids to the hospital. Turns out he was the one sent to the hospital from a literal freak accident. He woke up one day with slashes along his chest. He lost so much blood that he gets escorted to a hospital. What caused this? Adolescence syndrome. When you become a teenager, some start to experience this strange phenomenon due to various teen-related problems, like being indecisive or wanting to fit in, stuff like that. The reason this show is called Rascal Does Not Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai is because the main girl, Mai Sakurajima, tries to find people who can see her by wearing a bunny girl outfit, and obviously our main character can see her, but he's the only person who can see her. She's affected by adolescence syndrome because of her want to leave the entertainment industry she's a part of. She wants to just disappear from it all, and she literally disappears from the eyes and the minds of everyone around her. It's a cool way to tackle very realistic problems with a very unrealistic science fiction phenomenon. Now, the way this show works is Sakta believes in the adolescence syndrome or puberty syndrome. Dumb name, I know. He encounters more girls who are dealing with different problems with an adolescence syndrome, and he's Mr. Fix-It, basically. The main appeal of this show besides adolescence syndrome is the character interactions. Sakta is a very sarcastic and cynical type of guy, so he's not afraid to say horrible things to people. He jokes a lot, and that's where fun interactions come about. Mai is kinda like Sakta in where her actual personality is kinda cold, and they play off each other very well. Many compare the two characters to Hachiman and Yukino from Oragairu, because they do feel similar, but toned down just a little. Hachiman's a guy who doesn't care about anyone, and he's very narcissistic. And Yukino is a very cold individual, and the two of them click and open up to each other. Many people compare this show to Oragairu too, but this show isn't as savage as Oragairu. Sakta's interactions with other characters is great too, because all the people who get adolescent syndrome are related to him, so he knows them to a certain extent and isn't afraid to say things to get their attention. It's really good with great characters, good interactions between characters, especially Mai and Sakta, and an interesting premise. But what's the movie? Spoilers for the show incoming, so beware. The movie picks up right after the end of the TV show, so if you haven't watched the TV show, you probably shouldn't watch this movie, but that's your decision, not mine. Anyway, it literally throws you right in. Shoko is the girl that Sakta fell in love with first, and also a girl who we see in the show, but the only girl whose backstory isn't fully explored in the show, even though she has adolescent syndrome. This movie solves her backstory, but be prepared for a wild ride. When the movie started, I could guess most of what was happening, but the second half is just insane. The entire movie deals with her adolescence syndrome, and boy is it a doozy. So Shoko has two versions of herself living in the now, one who's in middle school and one who's in high school. This was talked about a little in the show, but heavily expanded upon in the movie. Older Shoko really pushes Sakta to do stuff with her because she's hiding something big. I'm really not trying to give too much away, but after the 25th of December, Shoko tells Sakta that her problem will be solved at that point. The whole problem of the movie is figuring out how to solve her adolescence syndrome at first. As the movie goes on, the situation becomes increasingly more difficult, and Sakta is faced with basically life or death choices, and science fiction shenanigans are involved as well. Now, whenever science fiction shenanigans are thrown into the mix of any TV show, I start getting confused on certain things, but it could just be me. I'm not gonna spoil it, but it's like the second half of Steins Gate. The situation becomes so tense and so difficult, the final payoff of the film is so worth it. This movie was super tense. Things just keep building and building, and you feel extremely stressed for your boy Sakta over here. There are a lot of parts where they mention various things or show key items that eventually show up later in the movie. It does foreshadowing really well and definitely deserves a rewatch if you get the chance. The things mentioned earlier in the movie can have you guess what's going to happen, but it's also hidden very well. The only bad thing about it is the very end. It's left up to your own interpretation, but at the same time, the movie leaves clever hints, so you can take a lot of stabs at the ending like I did. I was wrong because there was no after credits scene, but I feel like my theory was correct. Spoilers because I'm going to talk a little in depth about my theory, plus some other stuff. So the movie deals with time travel. I was saying science fiction shenanigans, but it's just time travel. The way it works is that you fall asleep and you wake up at a different time period. Sakta has to do this because Shoko's problem I mentioned earlier involves him, obviously. When Shoko was little, she couldn't decide what she wanted to do with her life, so she never filled out a career planning form. Because of this, her life eventually spirals into her getting a heart disease. She needs someone to give her a heart transplant, and the Shoko that came from the future told Sakta that he was the one who gave her the heart transplant, but that in turn kills Sakta. Shoko from the future tells Sakta this a week or a few days before it happens, but Sakta can guess when it's gonna happen. Before Christmas happens, young Shoko is worried because she's told that she's gonna die soon, so she asks Sakta if she could spend Christmas together watching fireworks with him. Unfortunately, this is where the conflict happens. Mai obviously also asks Sakta on a date for Christmas, and he has to choose one or the other. If he chooses Mai, which young Shoko knows that he will, she'll die. If he chooses young Shoko, he dies. Sucks for Sakta. This is where we get into the Steins Gate comparison. In the first timeline, Sakta knows that he could outsmart young Shoko by meeting her first, then going to go see Mai. So he runs over to where she is, only to be hit by a car, ? Just kidding. In the nick of time, Mai jumps in front of Sakta and then falls into a coma. In this timeline, she's the one who dies for Shoko. Sakta can't accept this, so he tries to figure out a way to surpass this so no one dies. He eventually goes back to the past and pushes himself out of the way instead of Mai pushing him out of the way. In this situation, no one dies, but Shoko doesn't find a donor and dies. I'm sorry, I'm honestly having a hard time remembering. There's just so much in this movie. Now here's some spoilers for Steins Gate. Okabe gets put into the same situation because he has to figure out a way to stop Kurisu's death, stops Mayuri's death, and stop World War III. And he achieves it by making his old self believe that Kurisu is dead. Okay, here's my theory for this movie. At the end of the movie, Mai and Sakta sit together in the hospital where Shoko's in. The only way to save Shoko now is to go back in time all the way back before he met anyone with adolescent syndrome. This tears Sakta apart because his relationship that he built with Mai will disappear forever, and he doesn't want that. He falls asleep with Mai on this bench, but when he does, he remembers all the memories he had with her. Then the movie does this cool fade away thing where the two of them are erased. It starts up again and it looks like everyone's living a normal life, and Sakta sees Shoko, but doesn't recognize her until he does remember her. Shoko smiles, then the movie ends. That whole sequence of everyone living a normal life I felt was a dream, because in the movie, many of the characters talk about very specific dreams that are actually true, but relate to different timelines, like Steins Gate when people remember things from other timelines. Sakta's the only person who can remember other timelines when he's awake, therefore, he has reading Steiner. If you watch Steins Gate, you'll know what that is. All of the things we see on screen after that fadeaway is just another dream he has before resetting everything to before he met Mai. It's just a theory now because there was no after credits scene and no promise of a continuation. Anyway, if you finish the series, you have to watch this movie. It does conflict and dramatic stakes so well, I was stressed watching this movie. If you want to watch it, it's not available anywhere yet, but wait a few months. You'll be able to check it out and see how great it is. I watched it in the theater and people were really getting into it. It might start out a bit slow, but it ramps up extremely hard near the end. Check it out if you get the chance.